All right, welcome back, everybody. We've got time for one more interview for you. Cry of the Xcluded is a group that has emanated from two trade unions, that's SAFTU and AMCU, as well as the Assembly of the Unemployed. And they, of course, are denouncing government's COVID-19 support services. And they say that the lockdown has been detrimental for people from destitute communities. Cry the Xcluded also criticised government's 350 rand for those unemployed and the 499 rand increase in the child support grant. This in contrast to the banks who have a loan guarantee of 200 billion rand. So let's speak to SAFTU General Secretary Zwelinzima Vavi for more on this group. Good to have you. Thanks so much for joining us here on the program.
Thank you very much, Leanne. Thanks.
So, I mean, we've been inundated with complaints and calls about how poor South Africans are dealing with the lockdown, and it really does appear that the cry of the Xcluded is much the same. Talk to us about your opinions in this regard.
Well, the real that is now to be a daily experience of ordinary people from the working class communities. We want that the package that the government announced earlier this year was not nearly enough to address the catastrophe that the economy will experience and that the ordinary people are going to be forced to go through. And we're now right at that moment, Leanne. We're seeing more people being thrown into deeper levels of poverty, unemployment, and we're seeing the employers not playing their role at all in terms of ensuring that even the half measures from the government are being made to be a reality for ordinary workers. And that's why we at this moment, representing hundreds and thousands, if not millions of the unemployed, the trade unions who are not part of the arrangements of government social compact that they're talking about, the representing the social movements, the working class communities across all working class communities are making a statement today to say it is not late for government to rethink again. And we think that what we need now is a new radical movement towards a green economy underpinned by a need for a just transition to create 3 million jobs now. What we need now is a focus on rebuilding our economy, on pumping money to ensure that our people have houses, that our schools are revamped, and that the crisis of 85% of our schools having no laboratories and libraries is addressed immediately, that we move towards a single healthcare system and revamp the current healthcare system, which is super for the tiny minority of people who can afford medical aid, but absolutely being exposed terribly in this moment, the public healthcare system that is simply unable to cope ordinarily with the normal situation that have been the abnormal situation that have been normalized in our country. But now with the COVID crisis, that crisis is beginning to hit us very, very hard. As you can see, that we are unable to cope with the spread in the Western Cape, Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, and Gauteng. And we're extremely worried about that spread. But we are more worried about the fact that we're seeing no plan to ensure that we turn even this crisis into an opportunity for South Africa. We build more cement factories at this moment. We build more brick factories, and we make sure that the water is available, in particular in the areas that are ordinarily marginalized. And that's why we're calling for a change of attitude. We're seeing lots of economists, in particular the right-wing conservative economists, as well as the employers, beginning to make calls that the lockdown regulations must be lifted, irrespective of the fact that government is unable to cope with the current rates of inflation. And we imagine if we can willy-nilly open all the schools, open all of the factories, as to who's going to be the face of the infections. And we know that the face of that infection and the people who are going to die from it is going to be the working class. What we think that should happen is not just a move towards a just transition of a radical Green Deal in the economy, but we think that government must do more to build the manufacturing sector. We are being exposed currently. We can't even supply the demand for masks, for sanitizers, and for all of the ventilators that are needed in the economy because we have destroyed our manufacturing capacity over years. But we think that this is now the time to plow resources, to rebuild that capacity, to build the rest of the manufacturing sector, to make sure that there is food security driven by small-scale community activities that will be supported at by all levels of government, so that we make sure that the current levels of hunger and deprivation in society are arrested. So that's why at this moment, as the trade unions, the civil society, completely excluded from the government consultation processes, are making those calls.
I mean, they're very loud calls because, I mean, you know, what I find quite ironic is that the cry of the excluded was formed in February, well before the lockdown even began. And, you know, this was already giving a voice to the concerns of very poor people. And now there are projections that the unemployment rate in South Africa could reach 50% and over, that we will have, you know, so many people that will be absolutely desperate. Do you believe that the South African government is doing enough? I mean, we talked to some of these grants that are handed out, 350 Rand, you know, to those that are unemployed, the child grant, those kind of things. Is it enough? What more can be done?
Not nearly enough. I mean, we want, and people will not listen, Leanne, we want in February that South Africa is marching towards a catastrophe. At that time, every sign was there that we're going into a recession. We are in a recession, and we got hit now by the COVID crisis, an epidemic of unimaginable proportions. And every economist that tells us, including now the Treasury and the Reserve Bank, says we're more likely to lose up to 7 million jobs. Now you can just imagine, we were sitting with 10.5 million people unemployed already. We had 60% of our youth unemployed already. The projections now say we're going to hit an 80% youth unemployment. And that 38.7% unemployment rate is going to be above 50, 60, 70%. Now, any country that gets subjected to that risks a revolution. It risks an uprising by the poor, unemployed people who are losing hope that the government or the private sector will ever intervene to solve the crisis at hand. No one wants a revolution in our country because we have seen that there are always possibilities such a revolution driven by hunger and desperation can land us in Egypt, in Syria, and can land us even in countries like some parts of the northern Africa where we have seen these types of uprisings. But we're saying that there is time for government to act. We want that the 3.3% stimulus package, which is largely focused on saving the big firms in the economy, was not going to be adequate. We called for government to put aside a 15% of the GDP fiscal stimulus to raise at least more than 830 billion rands to be able to intervene in the economy and do the type of things that we are calling for this moment. We were told that no, there will be 500 billion. It is going to be raised through loans internally and externally, and that those loans are readily available. But now those loans are not readily available. We need to to negotiate the interest to pay. We need to negotiate the conditionalities. And there's other parties within South Africa, such as the DA, that says that the IMF must impose conditions that will work against the transformation agenda that South Africa have pursued. We regard the 350 rands relief as nothing but an insult to the poor. No one can live on a 350 rands a single day. How much more when you are being asked to live on a 350 rands for the entire month? This is not just tokenism. This is a worse insult of this kind. We also think that the social package, to say to the unemployed who are not recipients of the social grants, you can only get a 350 rands for 6 months. And thereafter, we're going to look on the other side once the COVID crisis has been managed, is to say to them, black men, you are on your own. You're going to suffer because we think that there are more bigger interests, more important people that we must satisfy their interest instead of focusing on your plight as the unemployed, as the poor black African majority in our country. And we reject that 350. We demand that the government should, using a stimulus package that will at least compete with what is being done elsewhere in the world, put on the table something that our people can at least live on, can buy bread every day, can buy the necessities of life every day. The 350 will end at the time when you're buying a toothpaste and a toothbrush, and that it will be over. And the rest of the 29 days, you're going to have to leave from a situation where you used to be somebody who wakes up to go to the dustbins and rubbish them in order to survive, to somebody who have no income whatsoever. From somebody who used to at least to sell bananas in the corner of the streets and cut the hair of other workers, to somebody who have no income whatsoever. And it is those people that we think that the government should focus more of its attention in order to address their plight. And currently, we are not absolutely satisfied with the measures, even though some of them are very good indicative steps. For example, we've been championing the issue of the basic income grant from 1994 in order to address the plight of the people who have no income because they're unemployed, not because they've chosen to be, but because the economy we've designed post the apartheid have not been designed such that it will address the most basic demands of our people for economic justice, for social justice.
All right. Zweli, thank you very much. Apologies, I have to interrupt you there. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but I think you've gotten your message across in the strongest possible way. That was SAFTU General Secretary Zwelinzima Vavi talking to us about the demands of CRY the Xcluded, a group of unions coming together to appeal to government to do more.